I think it goes without saying that a vast majority of isekai is hot garbage, but in this sea of mediocrity, if you dig past the surface, and if you're lucky, you can find fantastic little gems that make all the searching worth it. One such gem is called Kumo Desu ga nani, written by Okinababa, and it's probably the most well-written fantasy isekai out there. Where other isekai like Overlord and Konosuba sort of fizzle out near the end, Kumo Desu on the other hand stays consistently great. It's got an anime adaptation coming out, who knows when, and the animation quality could be better. But the light novel is undoubtedly top tier, so that's what I recommend you read. So the premise is there's this fantasy world with an RPG-like system. In this world, a perpetual battle between a hero and demon lord rages on, and the collateral damage is so great that it reached even our world. An enormous space-time magic spell misfired and exploded in a Japanese classical literature class. Everyone died and got reincarnated in the fantasy world, including the main protagonist, a shut-in gamer girl who had the unfortunate luck to be reincarnated as a spider monster. Now she must do everything she can to survive in this new world. The premise may sound simple at first, but don't let appearances deceive you. I mentioned that it stays consistently great, but if anything it keeps getting better as the story goes on. This is because Okina took the time to not only think of an original idea, but she also fleshed it out and thought about where she could go with it. Whether a story is good or not doesn't depend on the idea alone. It depends on how well the idea is presented as well. You ever wonder why some isekai are great at first but fall in quality later on? It's because the authors didn't take the time to fully flesh out their idea. Take Shield Hero for example. The beginning was great, the premise original, and people were intrigued to see where the story would go. Turns out it went down the most generic path possible. In terms of being consistently great, no other isekai can hold a candle to Kumo Desu, and all it did was take the time to think things through. There is no filler where it feels like the protagonist isn't doing anything important. There is no unnatural progression of things. There is only greatness. But how can you be sure I'm not exaggerating? Plenty of people do it on the internet, so it's an understandable concern. To address that, I'll give you a sample of the quality of the writing, with no spoilers. Now, if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that I never mentioned the main character's name. That's because she never introduces herself. The story is told through a first-person perspective, so why would she? People don't just start introducing themselves to nobody. You have to figure out her identity through pieces of dialogue and situational context. But why does this matter? It matters because it tells you something about how Kumo Desu ga nani delivers information to the reader. It doesn't treat you like a child by exposition dumping information where it isn't needed. Instead, it gives readers just enough so they can piece together things on their own, only expositing when natural and necessary. But not having a name to call the main character would be a bit awkward for the rest of the video, so I'm going to use her unofficial name, Kumoko. The world Kumoko inhabits is so well thought out. Okina did some actual world building and thought about what exactly a game-like world would be like and how it would work. I mean, imagine living in a world where you heard a disembodied voice announce the skills you got your whole life. To us it's like a video game, but to the natives with no concept of video games, it's almost like a god of sorts who watches over you. Different religions form with their own interpretations of this fact. Even more surprising is that Okina doesn't make the church a stereotypical villain that you usually see in other isekai. Instead, she does something even better with it. You can have an amazing plot, set in a fully realized world, but if the main character isn't worth rooting for, then it leaves much to be desired. Kumoko doesn't disappoint. The biggest thing that makes her such a likable character is her unwavering determination. She constantly finds herself in terrible situations, and when most people would give up, she continues to fight. If she was anything less than that, she would have died from the start, considering she was born in a dungeon as a mob monster at the bottom of a food chain. It doesn't take an idiot to find out that the rule of this world is that the weak don't survive. Kumoko herself experiences this rule firsthand. Confronted by a hostile world, one of the first things Kumoko does is make a den out of her webs to shelter herself. A shelter she considers home. A home that she's proud of. But, just as she's getting used to her new life, adventurers arrive, burn her home down, and all she can do is run, too weak to fight back. With her pride shattered, she made the decision to fight, gaining the strength to make sure she never has to experience that shameful display ever again. Something I love about Kumo Desu that I don't see other isekai do is the fact that the protagonist earned this strength through hard work. Kumoko isn't given a broken cheat skill, she doesn't get a lucky start, and she can't just hand over the controls to a robotic voice whenever she gets in a tight spot. All of her victories and achievements are her own. So when Kumoko finally has the strength she's been working for and can finally start being a badass, it feels so satisfying because you know she earned it, especially considering the hell she had to go through to get to this point. There are some things that might be a big turnoff at the start, but I promise, they make the story better. Allow me to explain. So you remember how I said in the premise how everybody in the class got reincarnated in the fantasy world? Well, we get to see the perspective of one of those classmates. And the thing about this guy, Shun, is that he's boring. He's not exactly a caricature of your stereotypical fantasy isekai protagonist. He's got at least more depth than that. But he's still your stereotypical fantasy isekai protagonist. But here's the thing. As boring as he is, you don't want to skip his chapters because they are important for laying the foundation for the plot. Don't worry. Once you get to volume 3, the plot starts kicking in and his perspective becomes a lot more enjoyable. I personally enjoyed his early chapters because I enjoyed the contrast between the boring normalcy that was his life and the exciting originality that was Kumoko's life. Even with all that said, there are still some things I didn't get to talk about that I really wanted to, but I won't for the sake of time. Regardless, it's a fantastic read that you have to experience. I give it a 9 out of 10. Please check it out. And if you're still unconvinced, comment below so I can address both your concerns and so I know what to improve upon in the next video.